Move my hand or something?
You can move your hand, but just don't move your chair. That's the main thing. You can't go.
Yeah. My name is Edward R. Naccari, and I was born 1932, June 10th, 1932. And I was born in Brooklyn at my grandparents' house, which was 1075 60th Street, Brooklyn, New York. In Brooklyn, I went to school at PS 105, which was just around the corner from my grandparents' house. I was lucky, it was a short walk. I never really made it to high school. I was going to go to McKinley Junior High if I did, but I left Brooklyn and joined the service in Miami, Florida as a 16-year-old young man. We were living in Hempstead, Florida, and one day I decided to go into town and look for work, and I saw a recruiting station, and I went in there, and he told me that I could join the service. I didn't tell him that I was 16 years old at that time. I told him I was 17, and he said I needed my parents' consent. And that's how I got into the service, and it was 1948, around July, right after my birthday. They sent me to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for my basic training. After the completion of the basic training, half of us were sent to the Far East and half to Europe. I was selected for the Far East. We went up to Seattle, Washington, and we stayed there a week or two, and then we were shipped out to Yokohama, Japan. It took 2 weeks to get over on a freighter. Never being out of the country, I ended up in Yokohama, and it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. It was just starting to get light, and I was fascinated by the lights on all the mountains, the homes, and the people that came up to the ship. So after we left the ship, I was sent to the cavalry, and I spent about 2 weeks at the cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division, and from there I was transferred down to the 24th Division, the 21st Infantry Regiment, and I'm sorry. I was with the 24th Division, 21st Infantry Regiment about a year, and that was in '49, and I met my two best friends, Sawyer, Bob Sawyer, and Gene Ames. We palled around there, and it was wonderful, and eventually they were looking for people for the Honor Guard, General MacArthur's Honor Guard in Tokyo, and they selected me as one of the people to go to Tokyo to the Honor Guard, and I agreed to go. My MOS was a field wireman, and I was trained as a field wireman. So when I got to the Honor Guard, it was a completely different operation. It was just pulling guard duty and keeping neat in parades. We guarded the embassy, and that was my duty at that time, guard the embassy. Yeah, after I was in the Honor Guard for about 8 months, they decided to transfer me out. I was told later on that the 7th Division were looking for men to strengthen their unit for Korea. But I was on the impression that I was discharged from the Honor Guard because of maybe poor performance, but that wasn't the case. Can you cut it, please? I was transferred up to the 7th Division, Sendai, and at that time I was still classified as a field wireman, and they had me, laying wire and doing odd jobs that are required by a field wireman. I ended up in the 17th Infantry Regiment, the 7th Division, and as a field wireman, and that was my duty there. And shortly after that, the Korean War broke out in June. I was 18 on June 10th, and then on the 29th, I believe, was the Korean War had broken out. And shortly after that, we packed up all our stuff, and we were going to be sent to Mount Fujiyama for training for landing. At that time, we didn't know it's a landing in Incheon, and so we practiced up in Mount Fujiyama. We practiced climbing over these big columns that they made, simulating the side of a ship, coming off with our full gear and all that. And eventually, that time was over with, and we were ready to go over into the ships, and we boarded ships for Incheon. At Mount Fujiyama, I was sent to pick up some papers or something, and I would pass a sergeant who was instructing some soldiers on how to use a 300 radio, voice radio. And I stopped and I was listening and all that. And he looked at me and said, Ed, would you, well, he didn't know my name at the time, but he said, would you like to be a radio operator? And I said, well, I don't know anything about it. He said, well, we can train you to be a radio operator. I said, well, I'm already a field wireman. He said, well, we'll have that changed. And I said, well, it sounds interesting. Okay. And that's how I became a field radio operator with the 300 radio operation. Excuse me. Yes, and that's how I became a 300 radio operator, voice radio operator, and I was assigned to headquarters company and in communications now. And that was my MOS was changed at that point, and that was my job. Yeah, I was with the 1st Battalion headquarters company. That's who I was assigned to. My company commander was Captain Olson, and the one who was in charge of me was George Starr, Corporal George Starr. He was a code operator. He operated from a truck, and he did Morse code. And I was assigned to him, more or less. And any time there were any duties to be done, it went through him. Yeah, and while I was in the headquarters company, I made very good friends with another radio operator. His name was John Bennett. He was later killed in Korea, but before that we had many a time together thinking about things and talking, and he told me that his father put in telephone poles for the telephone company, and that he would get me a job with him if I wanted to stay there. And I told him that I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I thought that was a wonderful gesture, and we became very close. Well, we finally arrived at Incheon, and we were waiting off the coast for a while, and then the day that we were supposed to...
I gotta stop.
Well, when we got to Incheon, we were all excited and wondering what was happening, and the LSTs were pulling up the side of us, and the things that we had practiced over in Mount Fujiyama, climbing down these big cable ropes, the men started going over, and I think I might have been in the first wave to go over, and I was nervous because it was high, and we got on the LSTs, and we started in towards the beach. When I was in the LST and we were moving in towards the beach, I was really excited and didn't know exactly what to expect. I remember seeing a lot of movies, war movies and things like that, and that passed through my mind a little bit. But mainly the guys all around me, I felt secure with them. And we finally hit the beach, and the LSD opened up, and we ran out like we were supposed to. And to my surprise, there were already a couple of 3/4-ton trucks on the beach, and some people there and all that. And I expected a lot more to happen than that. Well, when we got on the beach, I saw a few trucks. There were 3/4 trucks and a couple of Jeeps and some people. But I was surprised because I expected all hell to break loose. We ended up moving up to an embankment and laying there in the sand for about 2 or 3 hours. Things were, people were moving about and all that. And then it was time to move out. And we were told we were going to get into trucks, and the men were to get into trucks, and I was to go with the lead Jeep because I had the radio, a 300 radio, and I was with Captain Olson and another officer. I sat in the back of the Jeep, and as we pulled out, it was dark, and we must have been moving about a half hour before we saw a column of men coming down on the right-hand side, and we stopped, and they were ROKs. They were South Korean soldiers with an American soldier leading them. In my mind, I was frightened, thinking that these were might be North Koreans, because I never seen one at that time, and I was frightened as they pulled up, walked alongside our convoy, and I heard Captain Olson talking to one of the men there, the American that was leading them, and he asked for hand grenades, if he could spare some hand grenades. And the Captain Olson, or one of the officers, mentioned that we can let him have one crate of hand grenades. And that was about all that happened then, and we moved out. As we were moving north, I found myself on a road by myself. At least I thought I was by myself, and there was a Jeep that was passing by, and then
Hold on a second.
Yeah, I was on the road walking, and the first time I saw one of our own dead soldiers was a Jeep passed by, and in the back it had a trailer, and in the trailer was a GI laying face down, and the puddle of blood. And as the Jeep went over the ruts, the blood went from corner to corner, and that was my first experience to see one of our own dead. Well, at that time when I saw that, I felt down inside, and I realized that, you know, that this was for real, and I was frightened in a way, but also I was confused with this whole situation. But I felt secure because I felt the men around. I'm lost. Cut it out. Yeah, but when I was with the men and all that, I felt pretty secure with all the equipment and all the guys, and I felt like these were all strong, and they were mature people, our leaders and all that, and I felt secure being with the men. And then the next day, we had to have a patrol go out, and John Bennett and I took turns, you know. He would go one time, I would go the next. So I was the first to go. And I went on this patrol, and there were about 8 of us. And we started out on a patrol, and we got out I'd say about half a mile out, and all of a sudden we heard some machine gun fire. And not knowing, and this being our first experience, we all ran to a ditch. And as I hit the ditch, my radio came up behind me and hit me in the back of the head, and I saw stars. I thought I was shot at that point. So I just laid there for a little while, and we were all quiet, and all of a sudden, coming down the road were 2 North Korean soldiers just talking like nothing was going on. So all of us being new in this situation, in the combat situation, they jumped up. The men jumped up and said, like, "I got you." And these 2 North Korean soldiers looked startled and ran towards the woods. Well, a few of our men ran right after them, and they were able to capture them and bring them back to the road. Meanwhile, I just was standing on the road next to the officer. On our way up towards the Yellow, the weather was starting to get cold, and at night we would sleep in we had our yeah, on our way up towards the Yellow River, it was starting to get cold, and we had our sleeping bags, and we would use them to sleep or dig a trench or whatever. Being in headquarters company, we were just behind the line companies, and a lot of times we'd have to go up on the hill where the line companies were and spend time up there. If they needed a radio operated, I would be up there too. So as time went on, the weather kept getting colder and colder, and there were situations where if you were online, the men would have to leave their sleeping bags, and one was issued to each man. So the 2 in a hole, one man would have to stay awake while the other was sleeping or resting up. This went on all the way up to the Yellow River. That was the way we did it. After coming back on a patrol one day, I came back and I saw this truck and it looked like a chow truck, and he was offering coffee and all, and I got in line. And as soon as I got there, before I even got the coffee, an officer came down and he said, "Come on, men, you're coming with me." He said, "Get your weapons and come on with me. We're going up there. We need you." And we followed him up to a hill, on the top of a hill, and apparently there was a firefight going on. And he said to me, I was the first in line, he gave me a box of ammunition for a machine gun. And he said to me, "Out there in front, there's a one of our men has a machine gun out there. I want you to bring him the ammunition." He needed ammunition. As I started over the top of the ridge, it was like a bunch of stones. I started over, the snow was very high. I got on the other side of it, and as I looked up, I seen the traces coming out towards me. I fell back, dropped my rifle, and rolled over in the snow. And then I got up again and grabbed the ammunition and grabbed my rifle and started forward again. As I did that, I came across a bush, a big bush, and right around the bush, another American soldier came out and he said, "Where you going?" I said, "I'm going to wherever that machine gun is to give him the ammunition." And he said, "Don't bother, he's dead." He says, he says, "There's no need to go there now." So they grabbed him. We grabbed him and we dragged him out and brought him. We're bringing him back. We're face down, and we stopped because we were all nervous. We stopped and turned him over, and he had the 2 grenades on him and everything. We were dragging him in the snow. When I looked at him, I recognized him from the company. I knew him, and I had spoken to him about a couple of weeks before. He used to come down off the hill and go to the chow wherever he could get some food. And I remember one night I said to him, I says, "Aren't you afraid to come down in the dark like that?" And he said, "No." He says he feels perfectly safe doing that. And that's what I remember about the conversation with this man. So we turned him around and we brought him back over. And when we got him to where the rest of the men were, we had a few wounded, and there were a couple of dead there too. And then they asked us to help evacuate the men down the hill. And I said, "Fine." And they made up kind of stretchers, and I got on one end. And bringing them down the hill, I slipped. The guy had a stomach wound. He slipped. I slipped, and the stretcher fell down, and the other guy had a good hold of it. And I apologized for falling down, and he said, "No, just get me down the hill." And that was it, and I brought him down the hill with the 2 of us. When we reached the Yellow River, it was getting late. It was about 6 o'clock, and the tanks and all were on the sides of the road, and the Jeeps, they just parked, wherever they could. And the rumor was that we were going to go home for Christmas. And so we were all excited about that. And then it told us just to find a place to sleep. And we laid down wherever we could. And the next morning we got up. It was a beautiful sunny day, and all of a sudden everybody's running around like crazy. And I didn't understand what was going on. And we were told that we had to evacuate. And sergeant or someone came over to me and handed me the radio and said, "Here, take an extra battery." And he said, "You see that road?" He says, "I want you to walk down that road, and it's 20 miles. It'll be a 20-mile march at least." The trucks and tanks already took off. So we started out as a group of men just walking down a road with our weapons and all. And as the hours passed by, we started to spread out, and there was debris left all over the road. I could see debris. Guys had thrown away this and that, and there were people pulling their rifles and whatever on a makeshift kind of sled type of thing and just pulling it. And I met this one man, soldier, and we started talking and stayed together. And as we kept going, the radio was logging me down. So I grabbed the radio and I said, "I can't carry this anymore. I'll never make it." So I grabbed the radio and I threw it over the side of the hill. And we kept walking. And as evening came, the rest of the men started disappearing because we felt so far behind. So now we were on this lonely road, this guy and I, this one soldier, and we looked up and we saw some lights on a hill. and it was a little shack there. And I said to him, I said, come on, let's go up there and get warmed up. And we both went up into the shack. And as we walked in, there were two Koreans, a woman and an old man. And they had something cooking, a hot, big pot on flames. So they offered us the food, and we ate what was in the pot. But when we got to the bottom of the pot, we saw nothing but guts and gizzards, whatever it was. And we were just glad to get it. It was nice and hot. We laid down and went to sleep. The next morning, we woke up. The people were gone. The man and woman were gone. We were alone, and we looked down and we could see the road. It was just covered with snow. The snow had stopped falling, and it was just beautiful the way that the snow was. And we left there. And we got down to the road, and we said we had to keep walking. We kept going. At that time, I was awful confused because I thought, when I found out that the Chinese had gone into this war and they were hitting the Marines, we thought, I was under the impression we were going to help them. And so we kept walking and walking about another hour, and we finally came to a clearing. And in this clearing was a locomotive and some soldier there who was waving to us to hurry up. And we went over there, and the soldier said to us, he said, you're lucky because in another 15 minutes I was leaving. We were told to wait here and for anyone who's a straggler. So I guess we were lucky. And we got on in this car. It was a metal car, like a coal car. And we sat there on the floor, and the locomotive took off to go south and get us out of there. When the train left and the locomotive left, and about an hour or so, when we got on this train, the locomotive, and it was headed back towards Hungnam, I didn't know that it was Hungnam or the name of the town. In fact, I didn't know where we were. So when we finally got there, this other friend of mine that I met coming back, we were going to our outfits. I had to leave him because he was in a different company than I was. And when we got there, we saw a bunch of soldiers, and we asked, where's the 7th Division, 17th headquarters company? And they told us it was down the way. So I left him, and I went on down towards my company. And when I got there, I met the guys, and I went over to George Starr, who was in charge of me at the time. I said, he said to me, he took roll call, and he was just about to give my name as missing in action. And I was glad that didn't happen, because my mom would have had a heart attack. So then I finally went over to John Bennett, who was close by, and he was glad to see me, and I was glad to see the rest of the men. After a while, when we were heading north again, I was assigned to a patrol again. And John Bennett apparently was assigned to a patrol. For some reason, I couldn't go, and John Bennett went in my place. I remember that. Something had happened that I didn't get enough sleep, and I was told that I didn't have to go. John Bennett went in my place. Then later on that day, I was called on another patrol, and I went on that one. And on my way back, and as I reached where the men were, one of the men ran out and told me that John Bennett was killed. And when I heard it, it was disbelief at first. And then he explained how it had happened, that he was on a patrol on a Jeep behind a tank on this road. Apparently the tank had slipped past the mine, and the Jeep hit the mine, and they were blown completely to pieces, the whole thing. They were picked up with body bags. And so I was, at that moment, I was kind of depressed. I was depressed, just thinking I lost a good friend. And I didn't know what to think. And as I walked away, I was confused with this whole situation, and I really realized now that if John Bennett can get killed, so can I. On the way to Heisingen, the day before, we stopped, it was late at night, and we stopped, there was a schoolhouse there, and I think they set up headquarters, and they let the line companies go out into the perimeter. And I was first to pull guard duty at the schoolhouse. It was out in front of the schoolhouse. It was awful cold, and it was snowing. The sky was pitch black, and the stars were so bright. I was standing at this pillar in front of the schoolhouse, and all of a sudden 3 men come down the road, walking down the road. They looked like South Korean soldiers to me. I wasn't sure. I speak some Japanese that I learned in Japan, and I thought I would say something to them, but I was awful tired. I was going to ask them, a few things like what time it is and a few things like that. But I decided not to do it. I was too cold. And they walked past me, and they went down the road. And by that time, I was ready to be relieved. So another soldier came out and took my place. And I went into the schoolhouse and laid down in my sleeping bag, and was just about to go off to sleep. But all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. Shots came through the wall. We found out later that, well, the guy that took my place was down. When I came out, he was down. There were people around him trying to help him. And it just happened that I was lucky that I never mentioned anything to these guys, because they were North Korean soldiers that had gone down the road to where a bunch of ROKs were around a campfire, and they shot them, and they tried to escape. And that's basically what happened at that point. And one other time when we were heading north towards Heisingen, I was sent out on another patrol, and we climbed this mountain, and we got up there, and when we got there, the officer noticed that there were Koreans, almost a company of Koreans down in the valley, and he decided he was going to call in an artillery strike. So he asked me for the radio, and I handed him the radio, and he called in coordinations with his map. At that time, I started thinking, oh my God, I hope he don't mess up on this. And after he called in the howitzers after he called in the artillery, I was thinking, boy, I hope he gets this right. So I think he called in a long one, and then whatever. So while we're there, all of a sudden we heard rattling on the trees, the leaves and everything shaking as the shells went right over our head. And then he said, okay, man, let's get out of here. And we started down the hill. And at that point, boy, I was glad to get out of there. I was awful frightened about that artillery coming over. I was at the 38th parallel the day I found out I was going to go home. And we were in a hut. And I think I was cleaning my rifle when some GI came in. He says, Ed Naccari, is there Ed Naccari here? And I said, yeah, I'm Ed Naccari. I figured it was another patrol. And he told me, he says, you're going home. Well, my heart fell down. I didn't believe it. I was going home. First I thought maybe it was a joke. So he said, no, you're going home. In 10 minutes, get out here, and there's a truck. There's a couple other guys going with you. Well, I was really excited about that. So we got on this 3/4 ton and drove maybe about 20 minutes before we met up with a group of men, all in a clearing. There must have been about 100 to 200 men there that were selected to go home. And at that point, they told us that we would leave all our weapons and anything we had in regard to film, any film that we had regarding, pictures that were taken, that we were not allowed to take it with us. So I left my rifle and everything, and they took us from there to, I think it was a ship, and then we went back to Yokohama or Japan. We went to Japan, and we stayed there for a while, and it was so great to be there and away from Korea. When I was in General MacArthur's Honor Guard, I was made a PFC. From that point, that was the highest rank I made, and I was glad to be just a PFC. I thought about my buddy John Bennett, and Julie and I went down to see his grave in West Virginia, and I have pictures of his grave and all that, and I miss him to this day.